Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Lewis from Awareness, and I just want to say thanks to everybody for joining us on the call. Deidre, were you able to talk?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Terrific. So just to give everybody a little bit of an update, Deidre is out running around to some clients. We want to make sure the voice works, so she sounds great, and we're really excited to have her on the line with us. For those of you that don't know Deidre, she's the President and Executive Director of TFS MarketWise, where she leads a team of PR and marketing executives strategizing to gain brand awareness for their clients through creative and strategic public relations campaigns. And just to give you an idea of some of the clients that she's working with, there are organizations like Hershey's, which I think she's at today, JVC, Kraft, Michael C. Fina, and Secure Horizons. You may have seen that she's an author. She's recently finished her 4th Financial Times business book, which is called Putting the Public Back in Public Relations. Co-authored by Brian Solis, who actually will be joining us next month for a webinar as well. That was published in March 2009. And she's also authored PR 2.0, New Media, New Tools, New Audiences, the PR Toolkit, and Cyber Branding, Brand Building in the Digital Economy. She's a contributing editor of Tech Connect, PRSA's technology newsletter, and also blogs about PR 2.0 strategies at DeidreBreakenridge.com. So, Deidre, we're really excited to have you on the line with us today.
Thank you very much, Mike, and I'm excited to be here, and I'd like to welcome everyone. We are talking today about how when you put the public back in public relations, you can successfully build community through PR. And we've seen a lot of brands taking their first steps. We've seen some great steps. We've seen some missteps, and also there are brands that are afraid to even take steps, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So the first slide, it's all in the approach. And I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about what's wrong with PR, because this is the anti-community building approach. Somehow, after 100+ years, PR has gone a little bit off course, and what we've seen is a lot of top-down messaging strategy that starts on the C-level. It's filtered into PR and marketing departments. And basically what's happening is communications professionals are accepting these messages. It's one way. They end up in news releases that are filled with spin, hype, jargon, and don't forget the canned quotes of the CEOs that are thrilled and excited to launch the next leading and revolutionary widget for their industry. So what happens when you get a lot of this type of communication? You're losing your credibility, brands are becoming much less transparent, and even the ethics of PR are questioned. So the good news is the social web is completely forcing this reinvention, and PR professionals as well as the brands need to focus on the right approach to community building, and that would be knowing that broadcast messages, they don't exist in the social web. There's no room for them. Consumers don't accept them, and that's not the way that we operate. Instead, we're focusing on these great conversations that are going on and engaging. This is a one-on-one that can lead to one-to-many. Conversations are pervasive, and they're meaningful. So there is the potential for anyone or any brand interacting in the social web to turn the virtual relationship, to take that community and to make it into something physical. And this is so great for PR. PR has always been about relationships and good communication, and this is our chance really to earn newfound recognition. And with that, we'll advance to the next slide. So of course, there are some wonderful opportunities and yet challenges that brands face. So just some considerations on the high level to community building. Before a brand should take a first step, what's the service factor? What is the brand actually offering to the community, and what value does it provide? And I think that's where brands take a misstep, because they decide that, what they're offering is actually more about them than what the community actually needs. And also, are you prepared and ready to respond? So take the example of Skittles. Skittles recently decided to turn its homepage into a wiki because they wanted to give their consumers more control. Well, they definitely were not ready or prepared for the chaos that occurred. And, even though their traffic may have increased by 1,332%, this wasn't exactly what they had planned. There's external factors to consider. So, there's a lot of easy access. When you have people coming into your community, how are you going to keep them there? What is going to interest them? What will make them stay or come back and interact so that they don't go somewhere else, which is very easy. There are hundreds, thousands of places where they can interact and be a part of another community. And the commitment factor. Silence is not always golden. Companies have to be ready to manage and direct continuous conversations and relationships, and this takes people and it takes resources, and you need to be prepared. Next slide. There's the participation factor, not only from the sense of who within my company will be participating to represent us in the community, but also what types of people are we looking to participate, because it's no longer about audience demographics. When you're in the social web, you're not looking at age, education, and income level, but rather you're looking at behaviors and attitudes. And lastly, the PR marketing factor. You want to make sure that your PR and marketing programs are actually aligned to business goals. You need to develop actionable enterprise within the community. So that means tapping into other areas of your company to understand, what is it that we're going to do to increase participation? Is this more about research and obtaining feedback? Perhaps our social network is for recruiting or employment opportunities. Of course, there's endorsements. And then there's leads and lastly sales, which affect the bottom line. So these are just some things that you need to think about. Next slide. As well as your strategic objectives. So, number one, you want to make sure you develop incentives for participation. Is this a community where if I am a part of it, I am receiving something exclusively from my brand? There are brands on Facebook who are offering coupons and different discounts for their customers. How am I going to organize my social media participants? How will I drive attraction, attention, affinity, and action? And a good example of that, just recently, as a matter of fact, Starbucks has a very strong community, both online and offline. And they came up with a campaign where they are spending at least $1 million to put posters in different Starbucks across the nation. And they're asking their Twitter followers and their fans on Facebook to be the first to find the posters and to show a twit pic and to tweet about it. So that is definitely asking for action and getting people to participate both online and offline with the brand. You also want to make sure that you measure value. And how are you going to convert that into some sort of virtual revenue? And measurement has changed, and all the PR folks on the phone, we all know about the editorial clipbooks that we try to make so thick, where we take column inches of editorial and convert them to advertising dollars. That's not what it is anymore. Measurement on the social web can be anything from authority, ranking, engagement, leads, sales, registration. So we're sort of looking at our objectives and ways to measure them differently. And lastly, you have to make sure that, your strategic objectives are aligned with your budget. What sort of requirements and guidelines are necessary? You're starting your social network, and there are lots of legal departments concerned with the social networking guidelines. Are you following the 3 R's, which a lot of companies now in their policies, they want to focus on representation, responsibility, and respect? And lastly, is your infrastructure set up? Do you have the technology? Do you have the monitoring that will help you to track the conversations and the maintenance? Who will be involved? Who is your community manager? So all of these things have to be tied strategically into your objectives so that they can be measured. Next slide. So here's the part where a lot of the companies are not taking the first step forward, and these are the false assumptions to community building. So you hear a lot about, this is just a hosting ground for negative commentary. The fact is, the commentary goes on, and we know this, whether we like it or not, sticking our fingers in our ears, that only stops us from hearing it, but everybody else is hearing it. So, and I always think about it, I had an interview in my book, Peer 2.0, with Mark Reagan, who is the CEO of Reagan Communications, and he's built a wonderful social network for communicators. And basically, the way he explained it, it was the best way to, he compared it to a barbecue, it was the best way to get everybody in his backyard so he could hear what they wanted, what they needed, and he could ultimately give them more hot dogs and beer, because otherwise they would go into a neighbor's backyard. And it's so true. He would rather hear the negative, the positive, or the indifference, and there are ways to sort of deal with the commentary. Some things can be addressed on your social network, and let's face it, if you have a troll who's interacting with you, you probably would ignore it. So companies are learning to do that. Having PR people as ghost bloggers, that doesn't work. That has to do with the commitment factor. So if a company is asking the PR department to do the ghost blogging, there goes the transparency that I spoke about before. PR people can certainly be bloggers, and they can identify themselves on behalf of the company, but they cannot represent someone else. You have an audience that automatically appears and participates. Definitely not. You have to work hard to get them interested, and once they're in your community, you need to use those strong tactics to keep them there and to let them enjoy the brand and have a better experience. Your community would be an open canvas to sell your audience. Definitely not. We're not selling anymore, and we don't even talk about audiences in that fashion because that implies the broadcast model. Your social network is a place to recycle, borrow, and plagiarize content. Definitely not. Everything is original content. If you borrow, you give recognition to somebody else. It's not a destination for poor content or grammar. As a matter of fact, as a communications professional, we still want to have some kind of review. Of course, we would never change the passion or the tone or the style. And lastly, it's an extension of your newsroom with marketing messages and press releases. False assumption, your newsroom can stay intact. This is not about your press releases. This is for genuine conversation and a chance to interact directly with your customers and stakeholders. Next slide. So on the contrary, really what you're doing is you're giving your brand the biggest opportunity, a voice and a persona. Today's consumers definitely want to interact with people. They want to see the human side that enhances the experience. You're given the ability to communicate directly with them. And there was a time when brands were not invited into user groups and communities to actually listen and to participate. So this is really, really a first, and it has to be done right. You're allowing a strong culture to form, and you're also gaining brand ambassadors. When you build that community and you get people on board, you get influencers, and influencers come in many different shapes and sizes. There's A-list influencers. Those are the folks who have 300,000 people following them. And if they mention your brand, look out, because it could crash your web servers when people go to your website. There's the tastemakers or the trendsetters, and those are the folks that we come across. They have about 15,000 followers on Twitter and about 5,000 friends on Facebook. And these are really, they're in every industry, and they're very, very passionate about their industry and the topics that they discuss. And then lastly, your brand ambassadors, they're your magic middle. These are your customers, and they could have followers on Twitter anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people. But guess what? These are the people who buy your products and services. So there's a great opportunity to interact with them and have them tell all of their friends. You're on a non-traditional platform for conversations, and you're in a forum that if somebody does have a predisposition about your brand, you can change an opinion. And you can do this through the dialogue and the communication much better than the traditional one-way marketing of the past. And you also have a destination to mold perceptions, and that's extremely important. So we can move to the next slide. And just so that PR folks understand, there are action items for you. Whether you're an agency or you're in-house, you need to know that, guess what? Your role has expanded. It makes you more valuable, if anything. So, of course, you're still a liaison. You may be working with the media and analysts. But guess what? You're now involved with technology and programming. And 15 years ago, I didn't see myself on the back end of my client's website doing, working the content management. I didn't see myself, uploading to my own blog or posting my video blog. So these are the things that we get to play with and to learn. We're dealing with editorial schedules in a sense that we're helping our clients to find out points of interest and topics and what are some great blog topics that they can use. We're doing content review, not the reviews of the news releases of the past. We don't want to go that way because we never want to change somebody's passion, but more so making sure grammar and spelling is correct. And also doing comment strategy and counseling. There are times when comments will come into your community that you're going to have to deal with a certain way, and if it's good criticism, you want to post it, and if it really comes in a fashion that is unacceptable or is just so negative about the company, you may address it in a different way and perhaps not in your social network. People become part of customer service, and actually anybody who is blogging on behalf of the company and listening becomes customer service. Suddenly we're also involved with web analytics. We're studying bounce rates and behavior on websites and how long people are staying and what they're actually doing. And lastly, we're listening. We are conversationalists, and we are identifying trends for engagement. So the role has increased tremendously, and that makes us more valuable to our brands. Next slide. So really, if you think about it, because we've mentioned words like behavior, communities, this is a lot about sociology. So I like to say think sociology first. I'd like everybody to take off their PR and their marketing hats and think about sociology and then technology. It's sociology because we have to be so focused on observing human behavior. And it's human behavior of individuals, and then it's how individuals interact with one another in their communities and what they're talking about and how they talk to each other and what ignites passion, what gets them excited so that they all pass information and you get this sort of conversation storm, which is the best thing that could happen to your brand. And then you think technology, because if we didn't have the technology, we wouldn't be able to provide those great tools that actually facilitate the conversations and be able to monitor and track what's going on and how your brand is being talked about. And also, the sociology lets us humanize our story. And this is really important because, when you're sending out a news release over the wire, you're really sending out that one-way message. Here's a chance to humanize the story based on the culture and the people who are actually driving the community, the people that you're trying to reach. So again, it's what matters to them and how do they talk to each other. And if you can keep that in mind and move that throughout your program, you will be successful. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to get into a little listening now because that's where it all begins. And it's a quote from Brian Solis, my co-author. So it really is, there is definitely a divide between the social media theorists and who we call the experts, and it's actually the listening that differentiates them. And if you notice the lovely, colorful diagram that should be on your screen, that's the conversation prism. And that is a brand's greatest opportunity to listen. The conversation prism, which was developed by Brian Solis and Jess Thomas, this is the entire universe of social networks. And this is in my book, Putting the Public Back in Public Relations. However, it's in a table form. But what this represents, it's all of the different networks. So sometimes brands are very quick to say, oh, we need to be on Twitter. We have to start group pages on Facebook, and let's get our salespeople on LinkedIn. That's the very obvious, but there's a whole universe of places where it makes sense to engage. There are niche social networks. There are document sites. There are bookmarking sites. There are blog platforms. There's rich media. There's the YouTube sites. We have live streams. So it really does expand the way that we look at social networking and all of those opportunities. And if you go to the next slide, this is actually a workflow, and it's the best way to start in the entire social media landscape. It's to take a look at many of those networks and work through a process, and really it's using keywords. You can go into any social network, use keywords to turn up conversations. So what you want to do is first you want to identify your key communities, and this is always based on, how does this sort of relate to your target world and the conversations about your brand. So first you identify the conversations in the social networks. Then you're going to observe. You're going to sit back and you're going to listen and you're going to take note of the culture of the communities that sort of define what your ecosystem is going to be. You want to take the time next to listen. So you search and you pay attention to important conversations that are directly related to your brand or your industry. It could be conversations that include your brand, or it could just be around topics that would be of interest to your brand. And now you're sort of noting the frequency of the conversations and the rate. And then from there, you can internalize all of this information. You want to dissect it. You need to analyze it, because ultimately, this is how you learn from it, so that you can take the feedback from each of the communities and do something with it. And here's the do part. You want to route it. So no longer does PR just get the information. It can't stay in a silo. It actually has to be shared, because social media and social networking affects many different areas of your company. So you want to make sure you share the information with customer service, of course with marketing, sales, perhaps it's product development or R&D. So you can see how it goes into the different business silos. Next slide. And this is all a process, and you need to put it into a process and determine, how do I take this information? I've now routed it to the silos. Where are the opportunities to improve products and services so that I can build something better, make my consumers happier, give them a better experience, and engage them even more in my community? And then finally, you're able to participate. Once you've done all that listening and observing and dissecting, you can actually engage with them. You're ready. You've studied the culture. You understand the behavior. So now you can go talk to your customers and other stakeholders. And what happens is you then have the ability to provide the feedback and the insight where you're positioning yourself as a helpful resource to them, and they're looking to you. This is all about giving meaningful and valuable information, and this is really what helps to build the relationships and to maintain them and to create strong communities. And of course, this process, it is ongoing and it repeats itself. Next slide. And what you're doing, just picture your brand in the middle. There's Deidre Breakenridge and all of her social networks. And I try to, even though we all go out and we try different networks and fill out profiles, I try to maximize my social chart where I really am, where I'm engaging. And that's what a brand needs to do. You need to chart a social map where you actually have community and it's growing. And this is, your social map will continue to grow as you get into more areas of the conversation prism. Next slide. But you definitely don't want to lose sight of your human network. And the human network is so important, because if we don't focus on the real relationships and growing them and taking the virtual into the physical, then we are just going to get, hey, let's get 1,000 friends every day on Twitter, and that's meaningless. As a matter of fact, when, sometimes I'll look at a profile and I'll follow somebody, but if they send me a DM that says, oh, I can get you 10,000 followers in a day, well, I'm going to shut them off because that's not what it's about. It's about building your human network. And this slide is just a very good example of a Twitter application. This Twit graph shows my network, its relevance. It talks about ratios of my participation, and it really helps a brand or an individual understand the best ways to connect. And the next slide shows my human network in an interesting graph, and you can see that the larger circles, they are representing those true connections. That's where I'm actually talking to somebody constantly, and the circles get smaller and smaller. So there's ways to see the strength of your participation and your community building. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about the listening, the importance of the sociology and the culture, opportunities and challenges for brands. Once you've made that step to build your community, whether it's your own community that launches from your website or is on your website, or you're a part of Facebook or another network, you always want to be able to use tools that will enhance engagement. And these are just some examples of tools, and we all know what they are. The social media release, there's ways to feed your community so that they can get constant RSS feeds from you. You can use streaming video, podcasts, blogs, and commenting strategies. And then, of course, there's social network platforms and applications. And I just want to highlight on the next slide the social media release, because I do think people are aware and brands are aware of what they are, but they are sort of an underestimated tool. So social media releases are these great viral tools that have sharing capability in the blogosphere. And I'm just going to run through what they are not, because it's always a little bit easier to say it this way. The social media release is not a mechanism to fix what's wrong with your news release. If you have news releases that have the hype, the spin, and the jargon, that is not something that you want to carry over to your social media release. It's not an announcement designed to replace the traditional release. We have many companies that are using both strategies. They're putting out a release over the wire, and they're also building social media releases that are housed on a blog platform that are then shared by customers, bloggers, journalists, whoever has interest in the story. And there's also a hybrid release, which you may be aware of. Some of the wire services offer this. It's a news release that can go over the wire, but yet has all the multimedia and also the sharing capabilities so that you can share that same release, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Dig, Delicious, in all the different communities. A social media release is not just a tool for journalists or bloggers. This is actually meant for your customers too, and they're very easy to find. They're search engine optimized, so if someone is searching or a potential customer is searching, it will be pulled up. As I said, it doesn't go over the wire. It's housed on a blog platform. And there's no standard template. It can take many forms, and I'm going to show you on the next slide what one looks like. The first social media release that came out was by Shift Communications, Todd Deffern's company, and it was a standard template, and I think it has morphed into many different types of templates. And lastly, social media release is not a tool that will control your message. It's not meant to. As a matter of fact, it's meant to be highly viral, and that's what you look for when you use this tool. Okay, so next slide. This is an example of the social media release that Brian and I used for the launch of our book, Putting the Public Back in Public Relations. And you can see on the left side, there's several photos that you can click on, 1 through 5, so you can get downloads of pictures. There's an audio file that includes mine and Brian's teleseminar at Biz Summit. There's a video of me speaking about PR 2.0, and then underneath there's a video about Brian. It's got all of the information in the body of the release. Most of it is bulleted for easy format. it has your outside resources so that you can build the story further and look, to other links and be able to view information. So for a journalist or even a blogger who wants to build upon the story, they would be using those tools. The box on the bottom, those are the sharing opportunities, so you can see all of the different social networks where somebody can come in and easily post this social media release to one of their communities. And it's just a great tool where you actually can get people talking. For Brian and myself, this was a tool that enabled us to talk to our readers, to interact with our community, to have them ask us questions, and for us to be there to answer and to provide knowledge. And we built this. The graphic on the right is actually it's Pitch Engine. It's just a screenshot of the Pitch Engine website. And the reason why I wanted to show this is because Pitch Engine is really a very good example of building community. And if you're not familiar with Pitch Engine, it is a social network for PR people, bloggers, and journalists. And it's a place where we can go talk about a great offering. On Pitch Engine, this is where we actually built our social media release. And you can build it for free, which is a wonderful offering. Beyond that, you can pay a nominal fee, a yearly fee, and actually be able to house your social media release on the Pitch Engine feed. And you can even build your own newsroom here. So this community, the commitment has been excellent, and the participation has been great from the very beginning when I got the invitation to participate on their alpha site. Then they asked me to participate on their beta site. And it really is a great place to build and share, just as it says on the website. So this is, we're to a point where we've gone through a lot of information. Most of all, if you just go to the next slide, it's really important to understand that when you're building community, it should start with you. You're going to be the ones to make the difference, and I'm talking to the PR professionals, because it's your attitude, it's your commitment, it's your education that allows you to then go and educate your brands, and it's also you learning the technology. So if you do all these things, you will definitely build community and you will make a difference. And at this point, I'd be happy to take questions.
Well, very, very cool. That was great, Deidre. I appreciate it. Before we do questions, I just want to do one real quick thing while people are still on the line. Just let people know about the next sessions that we have coming up.
Sure.
June 10th, we're going to be chatting with C.C. Chapman. If you don't know C.C., my favorite blog that he does is called Managing the Gray. So check that one out. We're also doing a special webinar that we just added with the folks at WebEx. So that should be an interesting one. We'll be using WebEx to do a webinar and chatting with the folks at WebEx about how they use social media. June 24th, we'll be talking with Jason Falls, and then on July 16th, we'll be talking with Brian Solis. So all comes full circle, Deirdre. What can I say?
Yes, it sure does.
So let's just jump back and we got a bunch of questions during the session. So
okay.
I'll start with kind of how they came in. And one actually talks about, I know you talked about kind of the social press releases that a lot of people are putting out now, but one of the questions is, have the traditional press releases died? Is there still a use for them in marketing?
They haven't died. It depends on the brand and the industry.
Okay.
So there are still many industries that are using the traditional release because they're using it for fair and timely disclosure. They're sending it out over the wire. But what they're also realizing, that's not the tool that's going to get them into the social media landscape.
Right.
And those are the brands that will then opt for either the hybrid release or they'll, in addition to their traditional release, they're going to go for a social media release. So they're still there, and they may go away depending on regulations, the SEC, how all of this morphs, and that will be determined. But right now, no, they haven't gone away.
Okay, so just on that same point, so what are the biggest mistakes that for PR objectives in general that I guess PR makes? Well, what are the most common mistakes that you see across the board for PR? And this one just came in from Laurie Miller through the Q&A.
Well, aside from the industry and the broadcast messages, I think it's mostly getting out there too quickly and not really listening. So a lot of companies are just saying, I need to be in certain places because my competitors are there, but I don't have a strategy behind it, and I don't really know what to do with it. So that's probably the biggest mistake. And then if they are, if conversations start, maybe if it's a blog storm, they're not prepared to handle it.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. And as companies, so just on that same line, so we talked a little bit about some of the things that companies tend to do wrong, or have done wrong, in terms of PR. How do you get started with just building a community in general? And this seems to be a question that's come in. I've gotten 3 kind of DMs on Twitter from it. But people are kind of wondering, everything sounds great. All the advice that you gave, all the tips and tricks that you gave are terrific. But people are wondering, how do you really get started building a community? How do you take the leap from just going out, issuing press releases and doing kind of the traditional PR stuff to saying, all right, I want to now build a community and try to drive traffic to it?
Well, a lot of brands are starting with just the blog. That is an easy starting point. And it's interesting. I'm going to step back for a second because some brands are starting internally first because they're feeling that their employees are the biggest brand ambassadors that there are. So they want to make sure that they do their programs right. They're introducing their internal blogs and social networks and getting everybody to understand the importance of social media and how it affects their business as well as the communication. And once they have their policies and procedures in place and people have a good understanding, they are then turning some of their internal into external facing.
So you really see it starting on the blog side of things, especially for the bigger companies.
It can definitely, that's an easier way to do it. You could, of course, a very simple way to build community might even just start on your website with the ability to give an RSS feed. Yep. So now you're, offering information to people when they want it instead of them having to come to your website. But I think if you're really looking for that community effect and to gather people together and to have the dialogue, you would start with the blog.
Interesting. So someone actually asked kind of a good follow-up question to that one. And it's, if you establish these social media communities, and what they're really talking about is kind of the Facebook, Twitters, blogs, that kind of stuff, how do you drive customers to the sites and even make customers aware of them? And, I think we know some of the things. You can certainly do kind of the social PR, and, you can do the, even email, right, to include them and stuff. But are there any other tips that you have for people to make, everybody aware of the communities that you're building?
We do a lot of cross-promoting, so from your website to the community, whatever, for example, whatever's being done on my author site is also promoted on my company website. So if I have putting the public back in public relations on Facebook, we're also talking about things on the website to drive people there. You're also, another thing that you want to do is as you're getting out there and as you're meeting people and getting influencers and starting real relationships, going to other bloggers, going to their blogs and commenting and being a part of their communities, that is also a way to, at some point, let them know what you have to offer, where they can then talk about you and drive people.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I was talking to a company about the same question just about a week or so ago, and it's almost like when email and websites first started to become mainstream, right? People said, well, do I include this in my contact information? And the answer was yes. Yeah, include it in your signature line. Include it in, at the bottom of your stationery or your letterhead. Put it on your business cards, that kind of stuff, because that's really where you want people to be interacting. I mean, that's how you build a community, right?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's so easy too.
Yeah, it's really simple stuff, and it's just a matter of adding an extra line, right, that people know that this is where you are and this is what you're doing. Another couple of questions that came up were around and this is kind of I don't know what the right word is, the $10 million question, right, around ROI.
Right.
How do you manage first? Well, it's kind of we had 2 different ROI questions. One was, how do you measure the ROI of a community that you build? And two was, how do you measure the ROI from PR? And I'm sure you get both of them all the time. So how do you think you measure ROI on both?
So I'll start with the ROI from the PR. You can see the ROI in terms of the dialogue and the conversation, and sometimes it's in who's talking about you, their influence, their authority, or their ranking. So that always helps. It's when you're looking at the overall ROI, there's a lot of things that can feed into that. So depending, if you're looking for bottom line sales, then you do what Southwest Airlines did. You're putting out social media releases that have a link to discounted fares that your customers can then just go and click on. And I know Southwest sold $1 million worth of airfares. That shows ROI. But your return on investment in terms of building a community, you might want to be measuring the participation. It might be over a period of time, the number of people who were commenting on the blogs, the number of people who perhaps you set up a wiki who are participating there. You're looking at the web analytics. Maybe people in the beginning are not coming for a lengthy period of time, but then maybe they're staying. Maybe you have guest bloggers who want to blog off your site. So there's all different ways to see it. Maybe you're using landing pages for registration, and that shows that your community is interested because you're having an event, and it shows the number of people. So there are so many ways. It's just you have to make sure that when you set your objectives, you are in fact pinpointing exactly how you want to measure them.
That's a great point. That's a really important point, I think, up front, because we're starting to see this trend ourselves where, say a year ago, organizations are coming to us and saying, all right, we want to get into social media. You guys are the experts. Help us. Tell us what to do. And now we're seeing companies come to us saying, look, we have, social media is a component of this marketing program that we want to run. And for, the community /site/microsite, this is really what we expect the objectives to be out of it. And once you have those objectives set up front, it becomes real easy to track an ROI. The ROI of a corporate blog, like you said, is very different than the ROI of a peer support community, for example, where you're measuring, how many questions are answered and what's the cost of answering a question, online as opposed to having to go to a call center somewhere where the cost is much higher.
Exactly.
So much easier to track when you have the objectives set up front, I think.
Yes, and you know what? Just as an example, we built a university for one of our clients that trains engineers, and it's a social networking portal with videos that they're able to view, and it has presentations and white papers and the ability to share and rate and comment. But when you're looking at ROI for building that, it's almost how many engineers are participating? Are they actually learning more quickly when they're tested? Are they able to absorb the material quicker than if it was a document that they were being tested on? So you're right. It's all in setting up the right objectives and being able to benchmark them all the way through.
That's a great point. It's funny. I don't want to keep, it's such a big topic, though. I think you can almost do a whole, day session on ROI and social media, right? Just with everything we're talking about. But, it's just, we were talking to one of our customers who happens to be McDonald's, and they did a program basically for their franchisees worldwide where they had people come on, and it was for, a user conference, basically. They were all getting together. And as part of the registration, we said it would be kind of good to leverage this point of enthusiasm and ask them one question. And the question that the execs of McDonald's wanted to ask was, what's the best practice that you've implemented at your McDonald's that we could duplicate around the world? And one of the guys, I forget if it was Italy or India or somewhere, but they said, look, we have this one guy, and he ends up spending about 40 to 60 minutes a day cleaning windows. He goes around, he cleans the windows because kids have cheeseburgers, and they have greasy hands, and they touch the windows, and we end up cleaning them. What we did was we went to the store up the road. We got this, we had this guy make this plastic film that goes around the windows now. So all we do is peel it off and put a new piece of plastic on, twice a day. It takes about 5 minutes, so we cut our resource time down. Saved millions of dollars. They implemented it worldwide. And that's not really an ROI so much as it's kind of a return on the content that was provided through this that a lot of customers, I think, tend to overlook.
And that, there's going to be a lot of return on the content.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting point.
Absolutely. So here's another interesting question that came in, kind of a different slant outside of the outside of some of the stuff that we just talked about. But on one of the slides, you mentioned that broadcast messages just don't exist in social media, and the person who's asking is asking, well, how do you view Twitter if broadcast messages are kind of gone from social media?
Well, that's such a great question, because the true use of Twitter is there's a lot of noise on Twitter, and you have to filter that out. So if you're truly building a community, you're targeting the messages so that each member of that community finds something valuable, because it's not what are you doing, it's what are you doing that will interest your community. So in that sense, even though you are sending it to several members, it's still not a broadcast message because it's targeted. And it is specifically for them. And it doesn't sell. So that's where I see the difference.
Okay. And can you provide specific examples of how people measure value that could be converted to social or virtual revenue? And this one actually came in from Kayla as part of on WebEx.
So if you're going to convert, if you want to get it into revenue, well, for example, when we have an event with a client, we are building our Facebook pages. We are definitely marketing it, getting people over to landing pages to register, but it physically turns into you're getting the virtual revenue just by the means of the registration and the sales. So that is one example.
Yep.
But you can use your social networks, and it works so well around event marketing.
Okay. And so this one actually is a real kind of tactical question, so we're going to go down in the weeds a little bit. But John Hancock asks, with a social media release video, are you using MP4 so media can download and use within broadcasts?
That's a great question. I am not, you know what, I am not sure if that is broadcast quality. See, here's the thing. If your social media releases, and this is just something about the social web, you're sort of on the go. And, you know, at my agency, we have an avid media composer. So technically, we could be using broadcast quality video that's plugged in there. So I'm going to say, because I'm not a video person, that I guess if you're going to go to the length of using the equipment that is broadcast quality, then perhaps you could do that. But for all of the people who build their releases and it's a webcam, like when Brian went to, when he did his video for our social media releases, I don't know if that was broadcast quality. That could have been a quick type of flip phone video.
Yeah.
So in some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. It depends on the equipment you use.
Right. Okay. And do you know of any are there any particular social networks that are good for connecting with journalists that you know of?
You know, actually, there are, well, if you go to Pitch Engine, there are journalists on Pitch Engine. I would think you'd find journalists on My Reagan. Also, you know what? There's media on Twitter.com, and that shows all the different countries, including the United States, and all of the traditional journalists who are on Twitter, and you can follow them. And the trick is, you know, you're not pitching them on Twitter, you're engaging with them so that at some point you can offer them information about your company, a product, or a service that may interest them.
And finally, last question, do you have any recommendations for a website? And I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head either, so if you don't know, it's okay to defer, but any recommendations for a website that ranks or reviews all of the social networks that are out there? And I don't know anything off the top of my head, but I maybe just mentioned something.
Boy, I would love to find that. I really can't think of one off the top of my head either.
Yeah, I don't know any that rate. I mean, a lot of, you know, I know a lot of bloggers that, and this is Diane, ask this question, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. I know a lot of bloggers have their own lists of the top social networks, but
Right.
I don't know of any specific sites that kind of rank them by community size or that kind of stuff. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question.
No, I wish I knew.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But Deidre, really, thanks for your time today. I think we got a lot of great comments, a lot of great feedback, and a lot of great questions for everybody out there. So we really appreciate you taking some time, and hope we can have you back in again. Maybe when Brian comes back, you could jump on as well.
Oh, I would love that. It would be my pleasure. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, and thanks for everybody who took the time to join us today, and hope you can come back on June 10th when we chat with CC Chapman. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.